say this to my team, I want you to push your elbows out. Therefore, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. If you're not making mistakes, something's wrong. It's about saying that that person deserves a pay rise just because they don't want to manage. Not everybody wants to manage. I don't fear fear. And rightly or wrongly, it's just the way I am.
Entrepreneurship isn't just about a great idea. It's all to do with the person behind it as well. The challenges, the experience, and the mindset of that founder often make or break the business. But here is the real question. Can a business succeed if the entrepreneur isn't ready for the ride? Today, we're exploring how personal identity, passion, and the will to push through those personal struggles are just as crucial as the business idea itself. So joining me today, I'm pleased to say, are Maxine Laceby, founder of Absolute Collagen, and a self-funded success story built from her own life experiences, and Professor Ketan Goswami, assistant professor of entrepreneurship at Warwick Business School, diving into the psychological interplay between entrepreneurs and their environments. So if we can kick things off, Maxine, with how your story began, because it hasn't been typical or stereotypical in any way, shape or form, and it's certainly come from passion, am I right?
Absolutely. It's a wild story, and I'll keep it very short. I got to 49 years old after being a very happy, privileged to be a stay-at-home mum. And Darcy, my youngest daughter, was going off to uni. Margot, my other daughter, just learnt to drive. And I just thought, wow, what shall I do? I can do anything. So I started a fine art degree. Within the first year of that fine art degree, I did this project called Dare to Go Bare, where I stripped myself of makeup. I had my hair cut short. I had the colour taken out. And I did this for 4 months, wore really dowdy clothes. And it was all about, as a woman of a certain age, would I disappear in people's vision? What it made me realise how desperately insecure I was about who I was. So I looked at myself as a whole in that 4 months. So physical, spiritual, emotional. And the first physical thing I did is I started making and drinking my own bone broth. A year after that, Absolute Collagen was born. We kind of worked out that the key ingredient in the bone broth that was making me feel so good was collagen. And that is a really short story of how it began.
And certainly developed this passion and you've got that product behind for it. So we'll come back to that later, because I'm quite interested then, Ketan, about where your inspiration came from to get into the space, the entrepreneurial space as a kind of research topic, but also how interested you are in the person.
And so growing up, the idea was to become an engineer, get a stable job, and that's what I did. It's only later that my interest in entrepreneurship emerged, and this was when I traveled to the US to pursue my master's in labor and human resources. This was around the time that dot-com rise was happening, and there were a lot of these amazing companies like Google, Amazon, etc., which were coming to the fore. But still, I think I wasn't quite convinced myself about me being entrepreneurial material. I was more bookish, and I still am, and that's why I'm a professor and not an entrepreneur like Maxine is. But really, my inspiration comes from my younger siblings who are not as bookish as I am, who don't necessarily need to be, at the end of the day, in a corner with a book or spend the weekend by themselves. My sister, in fact, was the first in the family to start her own business. And this was when she had a first child and realized that she needed a lot more flexibility. And you see that with a lot of people like her. They're looking for flexibility, they're looking for autonomy, and that's what sort of drives them towards, I can't get that in a stable job, and so I'm going to pursue entrepreneurship. And so my siblings have actually done that, both my siblings. My younger brother did it a lot later. And also, despite the fact that they are entrepreneurs, they are also very different individuals, different personalities. And it's interesting to see how both of them pursue their respective businesses and how much their background and their personalities have shaped them as entrepreneurs. And that's where my interest in studying how is it that people from the same family, two siblings, supposedly even from the same background, are driven in different directions. And so, for example, my sister, she's a lot more creative. we joke in the family about how she's more likely to get into a fist fight with people than any of her brothers. She swears more than we do. And so she's a very different kind of an entrepreneur. And my brother, he's more like me, I would like to say, more schoolish, more bookish. And so he does things by the book, whereas my sister's not afraid to sort of rock a few boats and challenge a few conventions. And so that's primarily where my interest came from. And like Maxine, she started her entrepreneurship journey in her late 40s. I started my PhD in my late 40s, and I did my PhD at Ivy Business School in Canada. It was very different from where I was living, which was Bangalore, which is high-tech kind of entrepreneurship. And I quickly realized that the high-tech kind of entrepreneurship that popular media talks about is a very small sliver of the entrepreneurship landscape. A lot of entrepreneurs are small businesses, again, very much like my sister. And that's why I got interested in studying smaller businesses and started exploring how the backgrounds might perhaps create constraints for them in terms of pursuing entrepreneurship. So that's what my research focuses on now. How do background constraints shape your journey as an entrepreneur?
I'm quite interested in whether entrepreneurs are born or whether they're made or whether it comes from, like your story, with a passion. Did you ever see yourself as an entrepreneur? I don't know, rewind 10 years before the bone broth happened. Was that ever something that you thought about?
Do you know, it's really interesting and listening to you then, talking about childhood and the way you're brought up and the people that you look up to. All the women in my life as a child got stuff done. They were strong and they just got on with it. That's what an entrepreneur does. So even as a child, I was a single parent mother who was absent because she worked 3 jobs. So I remember at 9 years old, our iron blowing up. And it wasn't just the fuse, it was the iron. And I chose to take the iron apart, write it down, rewire the iron and put it back together. So my solution focus was always there because there was no one else to do it. Yeah. So I would say my environment was perfect. So we always laugh amongst my friends and certainly my children. I cannot walk across an empty room without getting inspired by something. So I've always had business ideas. Years and years ago, I lived in the centre of Bath and I was about 23 and I lived in an apartment. When my friends came to see me, if they pressed the buzzer on the communal entrance, I didn't know they'd been. So I went to a solicitor and said, I've got an answer machine for my phone. Why can't I have one for my doorbell? Ring doorbell. I did that. I was 23 and they were like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. I was a little bit terrified of the finance needed to patent it, to come up with the product. So it's always been there. I didn't know the word entrepreneur, but it's definitely always been there in me.
Yeah. So how difficult then do you reckon it is to identify that what you're doing, the way your brain is working and those ideas you're having could turn into something that you could then do with your life? Certainly when you say, I didn't know the word entrepreneur. So it wasn't necessarily that you were consciously working towards anything. It's just the way you're wired.
Yeah.
Would you say the same about the people in your research and your siblings even? Is it the way they're wired?
I think partly it's wiring. You have role models like I can relate to my mom never having started a business, but she found herself to be a single mom with 3 kids when she was in her 30s, and she had to get things done.
Yep.
And in some sense, irrespective of whether you start a business or not, there's a term which is gaining some traction now. It's called entrepreneuring. And so entrepreneuring is not necessarily you start a business, but it's the action of challenging the status quo, actually getting things done. And so even this podcast, for example, you may not be starting a business, but you created something new, conversations between practitioners and academics. And so just entrepreneuring is something anyone can do. And so you don't necessarily need to be wired or even start your own business. But if you are somebody who's always solving problems, if you are somebody who can make do with whatever few resources you have. If you are somebody who's getting things done, like Maxine talked about, you are engaging in entrepreneurship. And so you see that happening all the time. It's just that we sort of have this very narrow perspective of what entrepreneurship means. And we just talk about that in popular media, which is a little unfortunate.
And it's interesting what you say about your siblings. So my brother and I are brought up exactly the same. He's 5 years older. He took a very safe route throughout his life because the safety was what he needed. He was 5 years older, had a different experience than me. I took a more brave risk taker route. So it's really interesting, I think.
So we're talking a lot about family and that kind of how that's influenced both of your journeys. And I love the inspiration in the difference that you're talking about as well. So do you think, Maxine, that that's contributed to Absolute Collagen and how that works now with your daughter being involved?
100%. You know, I always say we were the forerunner for the collagen supplement. You know, I created it in my kitchen by default, by accident came up with this formula, recognized collagen, came out with the formula, launched it into a market that did not exist. What I do know is what I'm not good at. I'm ADHD and I'm a bit crazy. I need stability behind me. Darcy's really stable. And so it works. And so she came in doing the operations, and I'm definitely the forward thinker, but I need a team around me to keep me in my lane because I am a risk taker. So I think you need a bit of everything. And, you know, anybody that says that a business, I listened to a guy a couple of years ago saying, I will never employ anybody better than me. Oh my God, I employ people far superior to me. And so but I'm very empowering.
Yeah.
You know, even like when my children were young, I remember Darcy saying once, we were in the car, she was about 3, and we were driving along and we were talking about what she wants to be when she grows up. And I said, you can be anything you want, but you have to believe it and you have to make it happen. And she went, a horse, I want to be a horse. Like, no, that's not going to happen. But, you know, I empowered them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, to empower people around you to support you.
Yeah. And I think that comes a lot with environment and broader context. And it's who, you know, if you're in control of your environment, you're in control of who you can be around physically. And it's an option, isn't it? You could absolutely surround yourself with people who agree with every word because they'd like to keep their jobs. But what you look at, Ketan, in your research is literally the direct environment and the difference that can make to someone's successes, right? So what do you think the power is in being really careful with the environment you select and people who might bring diversity in the most basic sense, the thought leadership diversity, the background, the experience? How does that contribute to the success or failure?
I think it's important to recognize, again, popular media tends to celebrate the solo, individual, heroic entrepreneur, not recognizing that, as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. The same holds true for entrepreneurs as well.
100%.
I think it takes a huge support team with different complementing diverse skills and capabilities. Again, for example, I'm very clear. The kind of personality I need my weekends. I cannot be taking customer calls at 9 p.m. at night. My sister can. And so I'll support her in doing that. My brother can. Again, I'll support him in terms of doing that. In fact, when he launched, he was single. He just needed a place to crash, but he wasn't making any money, so he wouldn't afford rent. And so all I could do was, hey, I have a 3-bedroom house. You take one of the bedrooms. And that's what I can do at this point of time. And he took the risk. He's the entrepreneur. We don't tend to see often in some of these stories how a larger family support system plays a role in terms of helping that individual entrepreneur in terms of doing what they are doing. Even the story of Amazon, if you look at it, Jeff Bezos is talked about, but his partner who provided that stability so that he could go and take some of these risks, even her willingness to move across the country to Washington, we don't talk about that as much. And so it's important to recognize that it really does take a village, and it starts with your family. And so ensuring that that you have this right support system. It's not always easy to control that. We can't choose the families we get, but it's important to recognize that it's going to go a long way in terms of how far you're going to be able to go as an individual entrepreneur.
Mm. And I think selecting those people as well. So I do with the Prince's Trust, now the King's Trust, and whenever I work with their young people, who many of them have come from pretty, strange or diverse backgrounds, or struggled with their backgrounds, and I always say to them, my biggest skill, and it sounds so fluffy, is intuition. I've got high intuition and high emotional intelligence, and that's come from my childhood. And actually, those two things have served me so well in business, because I'm really good at choosing people. And I do think there's a lot around emotional intelligence at the moment. And I think, and I've been an older woman as well, I learned to really trust it. So when I'm bringing people in, I can see the ones I can work with. I really can. And I do think that's important.
So thinking about that intuition you were just talking about, Maxine, I wonder, at what point did you know that this passion, you wanted to turn it to a business? And how do you go about going from A to B in that circumstance?
I don't ever think there was a point when I thought I've got a good business here. My purpose was always to empower her. And so I knew I had this product, I knew it worked. And the reason I went direct to consumer at the time was because I wanted a relationship with her. Collagen was new to the market. I was the only one that could educate her because we'd done all the science. Darcy, my daughter, was studying food science purely by coincidence. Supplements are a food. So we had all the science. We knew we wanted to educate her. And there wasn't one moment. It was literally about empowering her, making sure she was respected. Her journey was the best. I was the best one to educate her because I was the first to market. And I considered my mum every single decade of her life being the main customer. And I never, ever wanted her let down. So Absolute Collagen was the very first one to create a community. And it wasn't, we're creating a community because it's a good business model. It was all intuitive and the right thing to do. Direct consumer, making sure the product went through the subscription model, making sure it went through the post. She didn't have to wait in for it. They're great business models, but they were done because it made her life easier. So I think the purpose of Absolute Collagen has absolutely excelled where we're at. And it's never felt like a business. And I might, we're a £30 million business there. That might sound a bit weird, but it's never felt like a business. It's always felt like fun. And because our North Star is purpose, I think that's key to any success.
And what would you say about that, purpose as a driving force? Because absolutely, from it going through passion, family, the culture that you want to build, what you want to be known for as a brand, and that purpose then kind of shifting it all forward. It's quite personal, it feels.
It is. And I think Maxine pointed out that there's no one moment, right? It's a journey. And so usually we again tend to see entrepreneurship as that one moment where somebody has this bright bulb go on, has this amazing idea, but it's the execution of that idea which is easier said than done. And I'm sure Maxine and her organization, despite all the successes they've had, there must have been moments when it was extremely challenging. 100%. And it's not as if those moments are never ever going to come in the future. Like the pandemic, who could have predicted it, right? And so it's moments like those that your North Star or your purpose is going to help you be resilient and sustain you despite the challenges. So even when you are facing failures, and there will be, it's a journey of sometimes 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards, and there are moments when it's even 3 steps backwards, and you still have to find the energy and the resilience to move forward. And that's where your clarity as to what your purpose is would help you move forward. And I'm guessing Maxine would agree with that it's I'm sure despite the growth that you saw during the pandemic, there were times where
there's always been times, and it's really hard for me to pinpoint them because, and this is crazy, I don't fear fear. And that's quite scary. We took investment in 2020 because I wanted every decision I made and every penny I spent to be questioned, because I am a risk taker. So there has been many times, but I won't ever remember them because I just get on with it.
Yeah.
And that is part of the journey. If anyone thinks that's not going to be part of it, think again. But I have this thing where I don't fear fear, and rightly or wrongly, it's just the way I am. So I am a massive risk taker, which is why I need a team to really support and question everything I do. Not to suffocate me, and for me, definitely not to suffocate them. And I'm not always the one that's right, and I'm very aware of that.
And it's interesting when you say about risk-taking and put that next to resilience, because it's absolutely the failures. And when you say you don't fear fear, that's probably why you don't remember those moments, because you're not kind of sat festering in them for a while. They're just, part of the journey that you're well prepared for. But the idea of the team and the balance of the risk, to what point do you think that suffocation is likely, and in that dynamic? Is it a point where you say, this is what I'm this is my next move, this is my plan, this is the risk I'm about to take? How do people say to you, actually, that's never going to work and here's why? Or, well, I wouldn't do it, but it's up to you. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And the bigger the team, the more that happens. I'm the type of person, whether it's my personal life or my business life, I will talk to people. I will talk things through, but I'm not always asking for their opinion. I'm just thinking it through out loud. I will collate everything they've said, and ultimately I will make my own decision. My decisions are within business based on, I brought in a CEO a couple of years ago. That was my decision. And so what do I do in the business now? I think I got the best job. I got the absoluters on one shoulder, as they call themselves, and I've got the team on the other. They are what makes the show go round, right? They are really important. So every decision that's made, I'm thinking, how will that affect them and how will that affect them? It gets harder when you have a board and it becomes quite corporate. And that can be quite stifling. But you have to partner with people you really trust. And at the end of the day, I'm still the main shareholder. And I quite like that. I've never played that card. I don't need to. And that might be an insecurity on my part, to be honest with you, because I'm not digitally minded. I'm not financially minded. And I'm very honest about that. So I collate. And so one of the things I'm good and terrible at is I derail the team. So I'm an ideas person. And I have an idea constantly. And I'm like, oh my God, this would be really good. We could sell that in retail, because we're not in retail. That could be our retail arm. And to divert the whole team to that when our business model is really good, you have to be really careful what you do. So having those people come in and say, actually, Maxine, you need to think about this, is really, really good. And I think you just need to, I think what happens is you broaden your mind, you bring people in and you listen more. But ultimately, the business comes down to you. And I always say, in any business, there's a junction you come to quite a lot. And it doesn't mean one way's right and one way's wrong. They both could be right, they both could be wrong. And in the early days, I used to get paralyzed with a decision. Like, oh my God, I got this decision to make. How am I going to make it? And I kind of let myself go, thinking, actually, Max, you're overthinking this. Either decision could be okay. And I think you can get a bit paralyzed in that. And actually, you've got to feel pain. Even when you're thinking about children growing up or in a business, if you don't feel the pain of your mistake, you're going to make the same mistake again. So you have to allow yourself to get off, give yourself a bit of a break. As long as it's not going to be totally detrimental to the business and the team and the absoluters, then it'll be okay.
Yeah, what would you say to that, Ketan? Because I think it's a really interesting point about feeling the pain.
I think it's important to recognize that you will make mistakes, and that's part of the journey, part of the process. There's even if you are a brilliant individual, even if you have a brilliant team, there's so many variables at play that you just can't control, right? And so all you can do is how you can respond to the environment and even the mistakes that you make, and recognizing them and still finding wherewithal to move forward. Because sometimes you make a mistake, you recognize you made a mistake, and then it can get you really down in the doldrums. But how quickly you sort of figure out that you come out of it. And that's where I think coping strategies, we don't talk about that a lot when it comes to entrepreneurship. It's important to find a set of coping strategies that will help you and your team to deal with all the mistakes that you are likely to make during your journey of entrepreneurship. And so it will be interesting to know if any coping strategies that you identified, Maxine, that help you during times.
Do you know, I'm a bit weird, I think. I'm not even a glass half full. I just need a glass and the sun. I can make water. And I do turn everything into a positive, even if it really is so painful. And I say this to my team, I want you to push your elbows out. Therefore, you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. If you're not making mistakes, something's wrong, especially if it's the team that you want to be challenged and you want them to be really creative and really innovative. They're going to make mistakes. I just don't dwell on them. I really see turning it into a positive. I think the biggest lesson for me when I was CEO, excuse me, was allowing my daughter, who worked in the business, who still works in the business, to make mistakes. So I could have really micromanaged her and she would never have learned. You've got to feel the pain of a mistake. And no matter who you are, if you don't do that, you're kind of not learning. Yeah. So I couldn't be her safety net constantly. And I had to allow her and I had to empower her. And that's what I was saying about these junctions. My way or her way. It's okay. Just make a decision. Think it through and make the decision. And once you've made that decision, go with it. But you can still pivot if you need to. There is always an option, I believe.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say, because obviously you've got mother-daughter dynamic in there as well. So it's, the learning, putting the value on the learning over the pain 100%. And the mistakes and the saving. You could save her from that if you thought that would be better for her.
What she'd learned.
But what she'd learned.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I love that, and it's a fascinating approach, isn't it, to kind of fall down and get up again. But if you think about the environment that we grow up in, certainly in this country. You don't fail. You can't get things wrong. There's a big red X on your school paper. Are we a victim to that kind of culture? Because you've got to learn to take risks once you've finished your education. You can't take risks during education because you fail. And that's the end of that. Do you think, to what extent does that kind of learning environment play into the way that you then kind of develop?
Of course, I mean, if you haven't had an environment where you've been encouraged to sort of take risks, take chances, and make mistakes. I mean, it's a lot easier when you had role models at an early age, whether it's in the form of parents or other family members or around you in the culture. But you're right, there are a lot of cultures, and not just here in the UK. I mean, I grew up in India, and we were told that you pursue an engineering or a medicine stable occupation. Don't take risks, and it's only now that things are changing. And so it is true that we still do not celebrate mistakes and failures as much as we do. But I think there are, as Maxine shared, there's a lot of merit in doing so. And if we can learn from Maxine's story and how she is sort of going about empowering her daughter as well as her team members to go ahead and do so, I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. So yes, a lot of organizations, a lot of communities still do not allow us to have those safety nets that you need, because we talk about risk-taking a lot, but we don't realize that risk-taking needs to go along with providing a safety net. So if you look at adventure sports, nobody's going to go climb a mountain without a safety harness, right? Or nobody's going to go bungee jumping without a safety harness. And that's what families, communities need to do. They need to provide that safety harness, or they need to provide that bungee rope that would allow somebody to go ahead and take those risks. And of course, there's a possibility, strong possibility, that mistakes might happen, but be willing to, okay, we will take that hit and figure out a way to move forward despite those hits. And that's where I think coping strategies go a long way. And different entrepreneurs seem to have different coping strategies. My research, when I was doing my dissertation, focused on indigenous entrepreneurs from the Canadian prairies, and humor is the coping strategy. Despite all the challenges, at the end of the day, yes, sharing jokes, laughing about it. And so humor is the coping strategy. And so I'm not necessarily saying that needs to be your coping strategy, because even coping strategies are driven by your environment, your personality. I'm not I joke about, I don't really joke about it because I'm still a very serious person, but I can't do that. I mean, I can't be using humor as a coping strategy, even though I see others doing it. That's not me.
So me, what's yours?
I run. I mean, I take some time off. That's right. I take some time off. I mean, beyond a certain point, I do not socialize. I'm also very clear in terms of how much time I spend on the screen. My phone's always on airplane mode. And so unless, I mean, I know I'm expecting a call, I won't take it, things like that. I mean, I'm not saying you would want to be there extreme, but each one of us needs to, and especially entrepreneurs, because it's going to be challenging, because it's going to be uncertain, because you'll make mistakes, and you will need a way to sort of figure out how you will pick yourself up. And so whether it's running for Maxine, I think I saw a few videos on your website which talks about you love the outdoors.
And it's my happy place.
Yeah. So whatever your coping strategy is. I do a lot of my writing in Temperance, which is a coffee shop in Leamington Spa. And so Saturday morning, that's my happy space.
Nice.
I'm working, but I'm in a place where there's blues music playing in the background, and I'm having my cappuccino, and the people sort of know me, and so it feels like home away from home. And so whatever your coping strategy is, there's a lot of research right now, even on how entrepreneurs need to focus on their sleep and other ways that they can ensure that their well-being is there, because that's the only resource that they have. Your body is the only resource you have when everything else is going to the dumps. And so if you don't take care of your body, your physical health, your emotional well-being, then it's going to be extremely difficult.
Couldn't agree with that more.
I love the idea of you in your coffee shop, in your happy place, because I think you're absolutely right. I've never really thought about it to that extent, but everyone has got somewhere where they kind of just, mine's water by the sea or a lake or anything. It's just, tell us more about your connection with the outdoors.
My happy place is shorts, backpack, no makeup, and I'm out. I'm just running, I'm walking, I'm climbing, I'm just no headphones, I'm just taking it all in. And having a business has made me really get to know myself. So I think it's the right way around. What am I? I'm an introvert, extrovert, or the other way around. So I'm okay around people. I'm very good at forward facing, but I get my energy from being alone, and I need that time. We had a PR event in London a couple of days ago, and it was only 4 hours. It was exhausting. And the next day I was absolutely floored because it's very forward facing. And I think everyone needs that. But my time is definitely the outdoors. Do you know, as a kid, I used to walk. I did it recently. It's about 4 miles to school and back. And I'm sure that's where it came from. Yeah. Because I ran it a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh my God, this is such a long way. And Bath is very hilly, so it was very hilly. But that's where my love of being outdoors, and I do love pushing myself physically. I've got ADHD, and I think part of my coping strategy is sometimes to run and exhaust myself so my brain stops. Is that healthy? Do you know what? It works for me, and it's what works for you.
Yeah, and finding out those, making it personal, making it about you, when you've got to put yourself in the best place, right, to move forward in this especially this sphere. So what would you say about the the relationship then? We've talked about quite largely, haven't we, about the environment and external factors and the influence that has on the individual. But how important is it to find what we've just been talking about, that thing that recharges you, that allows you to breathe, your happy place? How valuable would you say that is?
Immensely. I mean, and as Maxine shared, you need to go replenish yourself, because, I mean, even if you are extremely extroverted and you're good with PR and networking, and each one of us, as we talk about an entrepreneurial mindset, we never talk about an entrepreneurial body. Our bodies have limitations, and it's important to recognize the limits of our physical selves and emotional selves. We have the stereotypical view of an entrepreneur being this young, male, energetic, heroic individual. But the fact is, all of us are different makeups, and you need to recognize the way you recognize your limitations in terms of, I'm good with numbers, but I'm good with emotional intelligence, but I'm not good with numbers. And so I'll bring somebody else to do that job. I think it's important to recognize your physical, emotional limits as well, and accordingly carve out a role for yourself, and whatever else you're not necessarily good at, but you do know that you need for your business. You find other people who bring those complementary skills. And again, it's easier said than done, and I'm sure Maxine would have enough to share about it. It's easy to say that bring a lot of complementary, diverse skills together, but then it leads to conflicts and disagreements, and managing that is easier said than done, and which requires a lot of learning, conversations, difficult conversations. And so it will be interesting to hear what Maxine's experience has been in terms of managing some of these pushes and pulls and tensions and conflicts.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's about taking time to understand where people are coming from. Not everybody's a leader in a business, and I always think sometimes you need flatliners, and it's so important, and I think some people are really good at their role and they don't want to get any bigger. They don't want to manage. So they don't get a pay rise. That's wrong. Just because they don't want to manage, they're still good. So it's really about looking and working that out and speaking to the right people and just making everybody aware of someone's limitations as well as their brilliance. But I'm quite good with push-pull. I think I've always had it. Every decision I make is not the best. I'm not a superhero, and I do get things wrong. Sometimes you have to collectively listen to more people, and actually sometimes you have to be brave and find the courage to go, I don't agree with those 7 people, but that's 7 people. I'm one. And sometimes you have to be, and that takes a lot of courage and a lot of being brave, but you have to.
So when we're thinking about courage and bravery and the general sphere, we're talking about also the stereotypical entrepreneur, CEO, whatever a child might draw if you said that to them. And you've kind of booked that trend, done it differently, done it later as a female. So how would you maybe encourage other women to take a similar, passion from their bravery and push towards something when, the odds are against it? I think it's not just for women. I think it's for everybody. And my story, my whole stepping into Maxine, age 49, I think we live in a world where everybody wants you to be anything but yourself. When I first came into my business world, nobody wants to know me. Even my bank, I could not get my bank to call me back when I was turning over £10 million. And I still get angry about that today because I was nobody, right? That really winds me up. So my biggest thing is don't try and be anybody else, because I could have gone to all these things and thought I need to be like that. Oh, she's like that. I need to be like that. Be you. You are your biggest asset. And just because you don't look like someone else, that's okay. So if we take our competitors, the collagen space is huge now. We get copied all the time. That's fine. The people that don't do so well copying us are because they're trying to be us. They're different. They're different people. I'm not saying they're better. I'm not saying they're worse. They're just different. They speak in a different language. Because you are different, you speak in a different sort of identity,
you attract a different audience. Therefore, you have to be authentic to who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say my biggest thing is you are enough. Be you. Really, if you've got a brand or a product or a service, make sure you're really being your authentic self, because that will come through and you will attract your authentic audience. That's what I would say.
And I would say the business would then reflect you.
100%.
And so getting it wrong, any consumer could tell from a mile off.
It feels clunky if it's
yeah.
wrong. And people feel something not quite right about this. They don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's where having a sense of your purpose, and we talked about it earlier, goes a long way. And being authentic to that purpose as well, as to because sometimes for that purpose you may have to pay a price, and you need to be willing to do so as well. And so, okay, this means failure for now. We may lose some business, but is this aligned with my purpose? And so it's easier said than done. And so being true to yourself. It sounds almost cliche, be yourself, but I think it's being comfortable in your own skin, warts and everything. And it takes a while, especially when you're young. I remember as a young kid, I hated my curls. For example, I wanted straight hair because somehow that's what you're told, right? I mean, straight hair means more handsome, pretty, or what have you. And so I hated my curls. But at this age now, I'm learning to accept some of my curls and all that. And I'm also trying to grow my hair. I'm accepting my gray hair as well. And so learning to accept yourself, and it comes sometimes at a later stage. If you're able to do it earlier, so much better. But yeah, I mean, learning to accept yourself and your identity, and ensuring that you're true to yourself and the purpose that you identified for yourself and your business is extremely important. I'm reminded of, and I'm sure you've heard this, I mean, as a kid, there was this poem, and I'm forgetting, I'm sure the source is some English classic, but thine own self be true, and thou canst not be false to anyone else. And so that's good advice anytime.
It's hard though.
It is. It's
really
easier
hard.
said than done, because at times you have to pay a price for being yourself. And the fact is that many of us, while we would like to be ourselves all the time, every once in a while we do take the easy way out. Okay, I've just had a very difficult day, I'm tired.
I'm going to put this mask on today,
And so I don't have the energy, and so I'll compromise. Every once in a while we do that. Even those of us who believe strongly that we should be ourselves, and if we don't accept ourselves, who else will? The fact is that it is easier said than done.
To be that confident in being that authentic, you've got to reach a point of truly knowing yourself and understanding yourself. And when you talk about, you know, what you're good at and what you're not good at, and those things, how easy is it to kind of have a proper grasp on you?
I think mine came from my art project. I was 49, and I say, as a woman, as an adopted child, as somebody that was managing her mother when she was younger, my mum had a few psychological problems, I'd always had to be somebody for somebody else. And so it was really easy for me to play a role, and I didn't realize I was doing that. And I think as a mother, you don't think you conform, but actually at the school gates you do, because you don't want your child to be different. And then I was done. And that whole art project of stripping myself bare, of just stepping into my spotlight to become Maxine for the very first time at 49. You know, could I have done it younger? Possibly not. Well, definitely not. I didn't. And I think there's a process that people go through, and you have to go through, sometimes you have to feel pain, you know, and I was just done. I was just like, I don't want to continue this life if I've got to be somebody else. And I don't think I'd realize I was being somebody else. And not everybody. My CEO says to me, I've always been myself, Maxine. I don't know what you mean. I really love that, you know. But we're all very, very different. And I just think sometimes you need to go to a dark place to find that out, or you need to be exhausted, because being someone else is exhausting. And find your tribe. You know, I always say my personal life is beautifully uneventful. Nothing happens, and that's the way I like it. I've got 3 or 4 very, very close friends that watch my back. They watch my back from myself, not from other people. And that I love.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'd like to pick up on something you said earlier about how not everybody is built to lead. And we talk about this a lot, being a leadership podcast, funnily enough. The best kind of metaphor I can give for it is teachers. So you've got the most incredible person stood in front of a bunch of kids in a classroom. Great, let's make them a head teacher. But all of a sudden, they're not in a classroom anymore. They're away from kids. It's paperwork. It's different. It's a totally different job. And you're right in that's where success is driving, right? So how do you address that in your organization? How has that been something that you are conscious of?
I'm very conscious of it right now, actually, because we took investment, the board grew, everything grew. We've got a phenomenal CEO, and everybody is on a projection to better themselves, to go up the ladder. And if you want a pay rise, you've got to do more. And I'm in discussions with, actually, do you know what? Somebody just wants to stay in their lane. Have a conversation with them. Do they really want to stay where they are? Or if they want certain person wants a pay rise, but okay, you've got to manage these two people. But that person's not a good manager. He doesn't want the responsibility of managing. He wants to do his job incredibly well. He wants to go out for a run. He wants to live his life. But in order to get a pay rise, he needs us to manage. So I'm having that conflict in the business now, actually. And I'm really glad it's been shown to me. Like, really glad. And I can see it so vividly. So it's about pushing back. It's about saying that person deserves a pay rise just because he doesn't want to manage. Not everybody wants to manage. And I think it's easier when you're not so corporate. And to me, it's just about taking responsibility for everybody. Everybody in the organisation is really, really important. And it's making sure they are seen and heard for what they are great at.
And you mentioned earlier about the instinct that you have with people and your intuition and who those individuals are. And I don't think that is as common as maybe we'd like it to be. Otherwise, the whole world would be getting on with each other, right? So when we're talking about this awareness of not everybody wants to lead, but that's how you get improvements. And when you're looking at an entrepreneur, it's almost as though you need that kind of intuition, those sorts of people skills, as well as the idea, the passion, the vision. Is it possible to have all of those things in a beautiful, nice, tied up with a bow in a balance that works?
No, and I think Maxine has shared that. I mean, there's no one individual, right, who has all these skills and capabilities, and that's where it's important to be real and humble enough to recognize this is what I can do and these are my limitations. Unfortunately, again, when we talk about the stereotypical entrepreneur, we don't see humility as a skill, which is important. We talk about this, the Elon Musk and these Andrew Tates who sort of strut around as if they have all the answers. Humility is not celebrated as much as it should be, but it's important to recognize what your limitations are, what you can do, and be real with yourself. I'm very clear. I can't do what my siblings can do. I can't be on a vacation and taking a call from a customer. That's not me. I can't do it. And if it means not having the entrepreneur tag, I'm at peace with it. I'm being real to what I am. And so it's important to have that humility as to where your limitations are. Also being very clear as to what your strengths are. Humility doesn't necessarily mean that you put yourself down or have the imposter syndrome that you were talking about a while ago. But being very real as to these are my core strengths, this is my purpose, this is who the real me is, and I'll stay true to that. And everything else perhaps is noise. If it's important for the business and the purpose, yes, I will get people to do that. But if that's not the purpose anyways, let's say you're a non-profit organization and you don't need these loud, noisy distractions, you don't bring them on board. And so, again, easier said than done. And you can't necessarily tie everything into a neat, perfect bow. But that also is part of the journey, knowing that it will be messy. Life is messy. It will be messy. And just creating an environment where when you fall down or you're going on a run and you somehow get that hill, which is difficult to navigate, you put enough training in it for you to be able to
Mm-hmm.
move forward despite that challenge.
Or falling down Kilimanjaro, which I did.
Ooh.
Mm.
So it's not a metaphor, even that one. That one
No,
actually
that
happened.
is definitely not a metaphor. I came back with a collapsed lung, broken ribs, and a broken shoulder. But anyway,
But you felt the pain.
felt the pain, and I would do it again.
So if we're thinking then about this package that we're envisioning makes the perfect entrepreneur, how important to you in your journey have that instinct that we spoke about, the people skills, the surrounding yourselves with the right people, that people emotional intelligence edge? How big a role has that played?
Huge. When we went for investment, we worked with an investment banker who is like a dating agency to go out and find the best investment people for us. And they're big, Atlanta, they're really, really good. And I still got a very good relationship with them. They said to us, I've never worked with a business with such high EQ. I was like, what does that mean? But we have, and it's good. I think you need bits of everything. If everybody in the business had high EQ, oh God, you just need bits of everything. But I do think it's helped. I think my childhood, walking into a room when I was 7, looking around, am I safe, having to read people, I can do that today. It's knowing my people, and being okay with being uncomfortable. All of those things, are, I believe, what's made Absolute Collagen. Yes, we've got a great business. We've got a great product, great timing, great business model. But none of those were set out to be those. As I said earlier, it was never about a business. It was always doing the right thing with the purpose. My North Star was empowering her. And it just happened. Everything we've done's happened organically, which sounds a little bit weak, but it kind of has. It's happened for a reason.
Yeah. I agree with the reason, motivation. It's like everything aligned for a reason.
At the right. And there was a lot of luck. You create your own luck, but the timing, the business model was and the product was the right time.
We are in a culture now. I like when you said strutting around, I've got all the answers. I love that, because there is absolutely that kind of energy around us at the moment. And certainly if you look at generations up and coming, and they've got an idea and a vision, and yes, they look at Elon and whoever it is and the cars and the houses, and that's what they want. But there's no real drive or awareness of how one gets from A to B, with the absence of kind of life experience or having to overcome anything. And I wonder if that can be taught, or if we're worried about the generation up and coming who want the fastest route, the quickest route, instant gratification, but don't always understand what it takes to get from here to there. What would you say?
I think there's a recognition that we need to change education in line with a changing society. I was in a teaching seminar yesterday, and we're talking about the usage of AI. And so these days, you ask students to make pitches. Every solution is AI powered. I mean, we had a student group which was, they came up with a spoon to feed babies, which is AI powered.
Wow.
And I mean, sure, but you sort of need to question this uncritical acceptance of that the technology is always okay and positive, and there are no downsides, and certain kind of entrepreneurs and their attributes is what we need to model ourselves at. So I think there is a recognition, which is happening at WBS as well, that we need to change education so that it focuses on some of these things that we've been talking about, humility. And so I was thinking about this, that we talked about it. Are we born entrepreneurs, or are we made entrepreneurs? Are we born creative? Are we made creative? Are we born humble? Are we made humble? Can it be taught? Can any of this be taught? And of course, I mean, for some of us, it comes naturally, partly because of our life experiences. You've been through school of hard knocks. You had role models like, say, your single mom, who's always made things happen, no matter how few the resources, and you've learned from that. And maybe it's that school of hard knocks where you learned creativity, being entrepreneuring. Perhaps you learned a little bit of humility as well, if that's what you saw around you. But I would like to believe that some of it can be taught. And it's just a question of the way we offer modules on creativity or entrepreneurship. We need to start offering modules on humility and ethics and some of these things that we need to take into account to counter what we see happening around in society. And so I think there is a conversation happening, and it will be interesting to see how the business school sort of adapts to this changing society.
I love the School of Hard Knocks. If only you could prescribe the School of Hard Knocks. I mean, but you would never wish that on anybody.
I don't know. I think I work with a lot of young brands, not necessarily young people, young brands. I invest in brands myself. And what I find when I'm being sent decks is the risk, the financial risks they're taking. And it's not their money. My business was my money. And that scares me because everyone chatters in millions. And I'm like, what? How many million are you borrowing? And you're okay with that? 5 million in debt, and I'm going into retail, and I'm like, whoa. So that scares me. I think it can be taught. You have to have the right environment and the right teachers. You have to question everything. And I think that's something I've always done, much to the dismay of people around me. Even as a child, I'd question everything.
Imagine your teachers.
Oh, do you know what? I never got to school, and school never got me. I hated school, and that makes me quite sad. I was always late. My mum worked nights. I would never have a wash. I wouldn't clean my teeth. I had to walk 4 miles. My mum made me do needlework and cookery because I was a woman, and we could never afford anything. So I would always turn up with nothing. I hated school, and that makes me really, really sad, because school is a place where, with the right teachers and the right environment, you can really be. And I just think there's a lot of pressure with kids right now. And I just think they need to be questioning everything. If I was a teacher, I'd want to be questioned so much, because that means if someone's questioning, they're expanding, they're exploring, they're looking at different pathways. So question everything is what I say.
Yeah, my grandparents were teachers, and that's what they would love. They said, we would love to teach someone like you, Bron. None of my teachers actually did love teaching me, but I was the same, questions and questioning them. And why did you say it like that? And it was something that was quite threatening in that sense as a child. But school again.
But I suppose, talk about changing teaching. They've got a window of 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, to teach you. And if you're questioning everything, they're not going to get it done. And I do feel for teachers right now, actually.
And the size of the classrooms as well. Well, guys, I think let's draw some conclusions from today, because I've had a wonderful time personally. So, Maxine, if you were taking your experience, how you've got from A to B, where you are today, what would be a kind of key takeaway, drawing on some of the themes from today, that you would want leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs of tomorrow to bear in mind when embarking on their journey?
I'd say be you. Find your tribe. Breathe. Question. And humility is massive, but not too much humility that you forget actually you're putting yourself down all the time. Just there.
Balance. And what about you, Ketan?
For me, I'm left a little reflective in terms of questioning how we can teach students to question more, because some of the challenges are, especially with social media, everything that an influencer or a media person says is sort of accepted uncritically. And that's the challenge of our times right now. That somebody says something and we just don't question it. And so how is it that you can teach that in the classroom? And so I'm left with that in addition to these modules that we offer on, no, you're not born an entrepreneur, you can learn entrepreneurship, or no, you're not born a creative person, you can learn creativity. How do you sort of train people on being critical, questioning, etc. is what I'm left with. And so, that's been my takeaway.
Well, I've loved it. And for me, I mean, when you said An entrepreneur isn't someone strutting around, I've got all the answers. I think that really spoke to me. So again, thank you both for your honesty and your openness and sharing your experience and insights with us today. And you can subscribe for more unfiltered insights on entrepreneurship and leadership. You can follow Lead Out Loud on LinkedIn, TikTok and Instagram for more. And we'll see you next time on Lead Out Loud.